Welcome back to the Jumpify Labs podcast, where we unpack what's really working in business growth and the systems behind it. Today, we're diving into the world where most business owners think they understand, but probably don't: cybersecurity. My guest today is Cherie Bourgeois, Cyber Incident Response Task Lead for NASA through Booz Allen Hamilton. She's the person NASA calls when things go wrong online, and she's here to help us understand what every business can learn from NASA's approach to cyber defense. Cherie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Pleasure's all mine. So, you and I, we both share that Navy background. What originally drew you to cybersecurity after your time in service?
Yeah, that's a great question. So whenever I was joining the military, I actually wanted to be a police officer. And it just so happened that it wasn't available at the time, but IT was. And it was a good career path outside of the Navy if I was to ever go that route, which I did. So when I did get out of the Navy, a lot of cyber terms were kind of being introduced and like, what does cyber really mean? So you take your IT background, this new thing called cyber, and I went to school for it. And it just so happened to now be a part of everybody's everyday job, and it's job security. So just felt like a good landing spot for me in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. You want that sense of stability and cybersecurity now more than ever. It's becoming something that's super important, especially with the advent of AI and just the way the world's going for sure. When you explain your job to family or friends, how do you describe what you do?
Oh, that's good because a lot of people in my family are not technical or in a technical career. So I essentially tell them that we help protect NASA's networks. And how do we do that? Whenever we get an incident, we respond to it quickly, we mitigate and recover. And then we take our lessons learned and recommendations on how to enhance and harden our systems back to the architects and data owners so we can continuously close the loop and enhance our detections and kind of stay ahead of the emerging threats.
Yeah, I think everybody knows that the threat is real out there. Also, not just the AI, but if as soon as you buy a website domain, you immediately get bombarded with emails from people, China, India, just all these different places. And you're like, how did these other countries get my intel? So it's definitely something that business owners, more than anything, should put some thought or some bandwidth to. When you are working with NASA, what types of threats are you and your team dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
Mostly phishing. They get a phishing email or click on a suspicious link or go to a website that has malware or code behind it and they click on that link and it takes them somewhere else. Now they've got malware on their device. So we see a lot of users, honestly, that just don't have the cybersecurity awareness, um, mostly, unfortunately. But then we also see a lot of advanced persistent threat activity as well. APTs that are targeting space and NASA specifically because we are a organization that shares data with multiple entities, universities, other countries, China, Russia, right? We have partners outside of the US. So we are essentially kind of a target. So we do have a lot of advanced persistent threat activity that hits our network too. So we've got a great team that does open source intelligence research. They package up those APT tactics, techniques, and procedures, indicators of compromise, and then send them to our hunt team to go hunt our network to make sure that we're not being actively compromised or someone is in our system that shouldn't be. That's our current landscape of our threat landscape, if you will.
Yeah. And I imagine that what these attackers are after is the data, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So what they like to do is go after our domain controllers, right? How do I get access and then elevate that access to what we would call our crown jewel data, our proprietary information, anything around our missions, launches, how we build our rockets, all kinds of information is essentially what they're after. Or if they can come in and just own our network at the same time too, right? That's the ultimate goal as well.
Yeah, and so the crown jewel, I like how you phrase that crown jewel data. It's like mother's pearls, right? Everyone wants mother's pearls. Okay, so I assume, of course, prevention is the best measure instead of actual reaction. Prevention over correction. What are you doing on the prevention side? And then when the threat is found or there's a breach, what kind of actions are taken on the correction side?
Yeah, so, being the cyber incident response task lead, we are already in a reactive state. So we're sitting here saying, we know things are going to happen. and we're going to be here to quickly mitigate and respond. But what can we do to alleviate how much we have to react and respond? Well, we can get really proactive. What does that mean? I can go hunt our network, right? You got to have a good baseline. You have to know what your network entails, inventory, assets, endpoints, all of that. Let me go hunt my network for known threat actors and their tactics and indicators of compromise. Because the really cool thing about hunting is a lot of smart people that share information across like the internet, CrowdStrike, all kinds of other threat intelligence platforms. So we can take data that they've collected and go look at our network and see if there's anything going on. So now we're moving into that proactive state, right? We're doing our research, we're hunting our network. And then also there's this other term that I just recently came across, proactive malware hunting. Let me go look
Mm.
at known malware and malicious files that people are posting and see if it's on our network as well. So you're kind of taking that more proactive approach so you're not having to respond and react as much. Now, when we do, even on both sides of the coin, if you will, whatever we find, we document, and then we give that back to our detection management team to go enhance our alerts and detections on the network too. Or we might create new detections and new alerts that we didn't have in place to detect new emerging threat actor activity. So that's another thing that we do too, especially in the recent breaches of Red Hat data, right? Amazon Cloud Services had an outage earlier this week. So it's kind of taking still the data that's happening or the what's happening in real time today and incorporating that into our detections to hopefully keep us safe.
Yeah, absolutely. My team was affected by the AWS outage yesterday, so I know
Was
all
it?
about it. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So for smaller companies, though, when should cybersecurity become a line item in the budget? Like, when should they start thinking about this and dedicate some resources to it?
right away. I kind of think about it as a developing software, right? You want to put all of your requirements and your security up front. So whenever you're working it through its change management process, you already have security baked in that you no longer have to worry about that at the tail end, right? My favorite line is it's not if, it's when. And a lot of small companies that are getting hit with ransomware these days, they don't have a good cybersecurity posture in place. They don't have the budget for it, or they decide it's not important and it's not a risk until they get hit with ransomware or data loss. And then it's like, okay, let me go find this money to now go incorporate security back into my system. Right. So, and unfortunately, it does take a lot of companies who don't plan for security, a major incident to happen, a major data loss before they actually do incorporate cybersecurity best practices into their organization. And that really should be your number one budget line item. How can I keep my data safe?
What would be, I guess, one of the consequences? I know, okay, data breach, but what can that mean for the business?
Yeah, it could be reputation, depending on what type of a company you are. If you're a company that stores financial data and you get hit, and this has actually happened, I used to work ransomware cases on our commercial side. Your reputation, if you lose clients and clients' money, you're not going to be able to come back from that, right? So that's one is reputation. Two is overall loss, because if you have to or you decide that you want to pay a ransom to get your data back, right? That's a huge loss depending on how much they're actually off or saying that they'll take to get your data back. So there's reputation, financial loss, and then you lose your data unless you have really sound backups that you can recover from. So there's multiple things that can affect your business as a whole if you are hit with a cybersecurity breach and you are heavily impacted.
So in other words, the worst possible outcome ever. The business can just be completely held on ransom. Ransom is such a scary word. It's such a scary word, especially too if an attacker can kind of gauge how successful the business is. They can make educated ransoms that make you put in this position where you're like, okay, they're not going to ask something super outlandish, something that's at least going to make you sweat quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've had other clients where their data was held at ransom and they didn't have money. And so the client was like, "I don't know what they're expecting. They're not gonna get anything from us, but, good try." So there are some smaller companies that are just like, "Okay, whatever. I don't have the money to give them. We'll just start over." But there are the ones that are bigger, your financial institutions and things like that, that if they are impacted, it could really, really impact their business and their future growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Business, not just the business, but the employees, their livelihoods. I mean, it's a cascading effect for sure. Now, so we talked a little bit about before in our earlier conversation. When do can companies just lean on the tools and the tech stack, their built-in services or their own built-in security systems versus having something that's built in for themselves? The differences between just relying on the tools or having something built internally.
Yeah, I like a mixture of both, right? I think it's kind of like one of those trust but verify. You don't want to rely solely on one tool for all the things, essentially like your endpoint detection tool. Let's say you use Sentinel-1. Sentinel-1 is great and it has a lot of great features in it. But I have a team that can create a script that takes some of those features an extra step further, right? So that's a homegrown tool that we actually leverage for triage, incident analysis, and things of that nature. So it's good to have a lot of tools in your backpack and not just put all of your eggs in one basket, essentially using a lot of cliches here today. So I do think that they are very reliable and they're only as good as you use them. So you got to use them to be successful. The data impacts the data that's coming out. But I do think having a good security practice would be a multitude of tools, not just putting everything into one.
Yeah, absolutely. And how can leaders create a culture of awareness around cybersecurity without being so like fear mongering?
I think you just have to make it fun, right? I usually start a lot of my calls with a joke or laughter or something that's very light, and it kind of helps the tone of the rest of a conversation, right? I think same thing with training. Whenever you make training super long and boring and death by PowerPoint, like yeah, you're not even really reading it, you're just clicking through, hoping to get to the answers. So I think being able to come up with creative ways or incorporating like your local team in a skit, right? You know the person. I think things like that can alleviate some of the fear and it can make people remember, hey, yeah, I remember this part of the training video is whenever Cherie did something silly and clicked on a fish. I shouldn't click on this link. That might happen to me. And it kind of gives your users something to remember and not just, click it through. What was that? What was that summary that said I shouldn't do this? So in today's age, it just gotta get creative. I know on NASA side and Booz Allen are, which is kind of funny, both of our certs are security operations centers. We do phishing campaigns. So send fishes out to users. And if you report it, hey, thank you for keeping our network safe. If you click it, hey, sorry, you got to take this training. Like you probably shouldn't do that. So to me, that's a fun, lighthearted way, like, I got me. Or, hey, I did something good. So I think that's another way that businesses can kind of incorporate cybersecurity training into their
Yeah. Sherry, if NASA employees are still clicking on phishing links, what hope do the rest of us have? And it's definitely a good thing to interject some of this fun and humor because it is a pretty high stakes environment as well. You are working with NASA, Booz Allen, I mean, one of the largest firms in the country that's working with defense, our nation's defense. So, yeah, it definitely is high stakes. What is a sign that a company is mature or maybe immature in the field of cybersecurity readiness?
That's a good question. So we had a team, our cyber threat intel team, where they used to build secure or maturity levels. So what they would do is they'd come in and they would assess a client, a company, based on their intelligence, like if they used a platform, how they incorporated that intel into their security practices. And we just have these pillars. I wish I had that in front of me so I could read it to you. If you don't have any security practices in place, right, that's not good. That's probably your most immature. I would say if your most mature is going to be you are fully documented. You've got incident response plans, cyber insurance, tools and practice. You've got a 24/7 security operations center with an IR team to respond and mitigate. You've got a cyber threat hunt team, intel team, actively looking at intelligence and incorporating that into our hunts and looking for bad stuff on our networks. I would say somewhere in the middle is where probably a lot of people are. How locked down is your network, right? Are you allowing secure shell connections for people to remote to their home network from their NASA laptop? That's probably not very secure. You kind of come in and look at some of these protocols that are in place, what's allowed and what's blocked, and that kind of teeters on which side of the fence if they're more mature or less mature, essentially. So there's a lot that kind of goes into it from a security perspective. But the biggest thing I always like to see is sound documentation and that people are actually following policy. Because if people are following policy, you're probably going to be pretty secure and safe. And then you have to have endpoint detection, right? You have to be able to have a mechanism in place for malicious to be blocked or malicious files to be quarantined when users do click on those phishing links. So that is pretty important to have baked into your network.
And just kind of like parting ways, what's one piece of advice you'd give someone who's building a business today in terms of protection? The policy is outstanding to have. Even just having some policy means they've thought about it, but maybe one piece of advice or maybe one immediate step, something that they should definitely do.
I know we talked about incorporating cybersecurity up front. I would honestly focus on what your threat would be specific to your company, right? If you're a financial firm or if you're, you have different threats. So understanding your threat landscape based on the company and the products and services that you provide, who would be attacking you, whether it be insider threat. We have a lot of those cases as well, whether it be a foreign adversary. So if you can kind of start to understand who is attacking you, you can essentially successfully mitigate those attacks when they do happen, or you can prevent them, kind of like what you were alluding to earlier. How do we get to that preventive state? And it's really knowing who your adversary is and who would be after your crown jewels, essentially.
Okay. Well, Sherry, thank you so much. Where can listeners connect with you online or maybe learn more about the work you're doing with Booz Allen, NASA? Where can people connect with you?
Well, awesome. I am on LinkedIn. If you have my first and last name, I'm probably the top one that comes up. So I'm available there. I'm on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, or you can reach out to me, my personal email. I'm happy to provide that as well for users too. So
Cybersecurity girl is gonna give her email to the internet.
goes right to my spam.
There you go. Yeah, okay. I'll make sure everyone has your name and full name, correct spelling, so they can reach out to you. Okay, Sherry, thank you so much for your time. My name is Jay. If you like episodes like this, if you're wanting to learn more about the growth strategies, the systems that people are using in their growing businesses today, make sure you tune in for more. Again, my name is Jay. Thank you so much. Take care.